The story of the Qing Empire in the 18th and 19th centuries is one of dazzling power and catastrophic collapse. Imagine a civilization that saw itself as the center of the world, a realm so vast and wealthy that foreign kings were treated as mere tributaries. In the mid-1700s, China under the Qing Dynasty commanded one of the largest populations on Earth, boasted a flourishing economy, and radiated an ancient confidence rooted in millennia of culture. Yet within a single century, that same empire was brought to its knees by a handful of gunboats and a bitter trade in opium. How could the richest, most powerful empire in Asia fall so quickly to outsiders, it once dismissed as barbarians? The answer lies in a tangled web of pride, greed, global trade, and two brutal wars that changed the course of Chinese history forever. To understand the fall, we must begin with the rise. The Qing Dynasty was not originally Chinese at all. Its founders were Manchus, a semi-nomadic people from beyond the Great Wall, who had seized power in 1644 after the collapse of the Ming Dynasty. Once in control, the Qing embraced Chinese traditions, claiming the mandate of heaven, ruling as Confucian monarchs and projecting an image of stability and harmony. They expanded China's borders to an unprecedented scale, annexing Tibet, Xinjiang, and Mongolia, creating a true multi-ethnic empire. By the 18th century, under emperors like Kangxi and Qianlong, the Qing seemed unstoppable. Population soared to nearly 400 million, agriculture flourished, and Chinese goods, tea, porcelain, silk, became luxuries craved across Europe. For the imperial court in Beijing, the outside world was of little concern. Foreigners were expected to bow, literally and figuratively, before the Son of Heaven. But the world was changing. While China looked inward, Europe was undergoing revolutions of science, industry, and trade. European empires were carving up the globe, powered by ships, muskets, and soon steam engines. When Western merchants knocked on China's door, they encountered a wall of cultural arrogance. The Qing allowed trade only through the Canton system, restricting foreigners to one port under strict regulation. The British, whose empire was rapidly becoming the most powerful on Earth, found this arrangement frustrating. Britain's appetite for Chinese tea was insatiable, and tea had become a daily ritual in London drawing rooms. But the British had little to offer in return that the Chinese wanted. Silver was flowing out of Britain and into China in staggering amounts, creating a trade imbalance that alarmed the crown. The solution Britain found was both brilliant and catastrophic: opium. Produced in vast quantities in British-controlled India, opium was shipped into China despite the Qing government's prohibition. What began as a trickle in the late 18th century swelled into a flood by the early 19th. Millions of Chinese became addicted, productivity fell, families were destroyed, and silver now drained out of China at an alarming rate. The very metal that had once flowed into Qing coffers was now hemorrhaging back to the British. Officials warned the emperor of the disaster, but the imperial court underestimated the scale of the crisis. To the emperor, foreign merchants were a nuisance, opium was a moral corruption, and China's greatness was eternal. Few realized that the drug trade had set the stage for a direct confrontation with an empire whose industrial might was surging ahead. In 1839, the Qing decided to act. The emperor appointed Lin Zexu, a brilliant and incorruptible official, to crack down on the opium trade. Lin arrived in Canton with a reputation for honesty and an iron will. He arrested dealers, confiscated supplies, and famously ordered the destruction of over 20,000 chests of opium, dumping the narcotic into the sea. In a dramatic gesture, he even wrote a letter to Queen Victoria herself, appealing to her morality and asking why Britain would poison another nation for profit. But if Lin Zexu expected mercy, he misunderstood the world he was facing. For Britain, this was not just about morality. It was about money, empire, and national pride. The British responded not with negotiation, but with war. Their ships, armed with cannons and powered by sails and steam, cut through Chinese defenses with shocking ease. The Qing military, still relying on outdated weapons and tactics, was no match for Britain's industrial war machine. Battles along the coast, exposed China's vulnerability. In 1842, after a series of humiliating defeats, the Qing sued for peace, leading to the Treaty of Nanjing. It was the first of what came to be known as the unequal treaties. Britain gained control of Hong Kong, opened multiple ports to trade, and secured vast indemnities. Worse still, the principle of extraterritoriality was introduced, allowing foreigners to live under their own laws on Chinese soil. For the first time in its long history, China's sovereignty was compromised, but the humiliation did not end there. The First War only whetted Britain's appetite. Other Western powers soon followed, demanding their own privileges. France, the United States, and Russia extracted similar treaties, slicing away at China's autonomy. Inside the empire, resentment festered. The people saw their rulers as weak, unable to defend the Middle Kingdom from outsiders. Corruption spread, rebellions flared, and the imperial prestige that had once awed neighbors was crumbling before the eyes of its own subjects. Yet the Qing court remained stubbornly blind, clinging to ancient traditions while the modern world surged ahead. The second confrontation, known as the Second Opium War, erupted in 1856. This time, Britain was joined by France. Once again, the Western powers demanded more concessions, and once again, the Qing resisted. The result was devastating. Western troops marched on Beijing, and in 1860, in a moment of sheer humiliation, British and French forces looted and burned the Summer Palace, a jewel of imperial culture. The emperor fled, and China was forced to sign yet another treaty, opening even more ports, legalizing the opium trade, and ceding further control. The message was clear. The Qing Dynasty, once the master of Asia, was now at the mercy of foreign powers. And yet, the story of the Opium Wars is not just about military defeat. It is about the collision of two worlds, one ancient, rooted in tradition and hierarchy, and the other modern, driven by commerce, technology, and ruthless ambition. For the West, the wars opened the gates of China to trade and exploitation. For the Chinese, they marked the beginning of a century of humiliation, a wound that shaped the nation's psyche for generations to come. The loss of sovereignty, the flood of opium, the foreign soldiers on Chinese soil, all of this left scars that would not heal easily. But if this was merely the beginning, what came next would plunge China even deeper into chaos. The Opium Wars were only the first blow. Rebellions erupted across the empire, foreign powers carved spheres of influence, and the dynasty that once seemed eternal found itself teetering on collapse. Yet out of this destruction would rise a new vision of China, one that would redefine its place in the world. The Qing Empire, so confident in its supremacy, had now been exposed as vulnerable. The Opium Wars were not just battles over a drug, they were battles over the future of China itself. But this was not the end. The real unraveling of Qing power and the dramatic consequences for both East and West were only just beginning. What happened when the dynasty that once called itself the Middle Kingdom could no longer hold its center? How did a trade in narcotics spiral into a collapse that reshaped global history? And why does the shadow of the Opium Wars still linger in China's national memory today? The answers lie in the next, even darker chapter of this story.